Very good afternoon to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the PIM Alumni Exco, I warmly welcome you to be a part of a very thought-provoking session. Today, we are having the fourth session in a series of webinars, and we are about to open up our minds to a very important and time-critical topic. With that, I will hand it over to Shiranthi Tevaraperuma, Vice President of PIM Alumni, to introduce our eminent thought leaders for the day.
Thank you very much, Dhananjay, and a very good afternoon to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure and privilege to be reading out to you and introducing our very eminent panel and our moderator this evening, our very own Professor Ajantha Dharmasiri. Professor Ajantha Dharmasiri is the Director and the Chairman of the Board of Management of the Postgraduate Institute of Management, University of Sri Jayawardenepura. He's also the Chairman, Technical Committee, World Congress for 2020. Professor Dharmasiri also serves as an adjunct professor in International Human Resource Management at the Price College of Business, University of Oklahoma, USA. A past president of the Institute of Personnel Management, he also served as a vice president of the Asia Pacific Federation of Human Resource Management. He bags almost 3 decades of working experience, both in the private and public sector, in diverse environments, including Unilever and Nestle. He's a chartered electrical engineer and a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Management, also a fellow member of the Sri Lanka Institute of Training and Development. He functions as a certified peer reviewer of the South Asian Quality System and an advisor to the Old Royalists HR Professional Association. Professor Dharmasiri likes to identify himself as one who transitioned from being an engineer of electricals to an engineer of hearts and minds. We very warmly and respectfully welcome you, sir. Now I move on to introducing the 4 eminent panelists. I would like to mention here that there is something common in all 4 of these panelists this evening. That commonality in them is that they are all proud products of our very own PIM. Our first panelist this evening is Mrs. Gaini Dialvis. Gaini Dialvis is a leading supply chain professional. She was the former director, customer service and management committee member of Unilever Sri Lanka Limited, responsible for supply chain. As the first female director of Unilever South Asia supply chain, she bags over 19 years of experience in quality assurance, research and development, and supply chain prior to her early retirement to start her own consulting and lecturing career. Gaini holds an MSc in Food Process Engineering from University of Reading, UK, prior to which she did her undergraduate studies in Chemical Engineering at University of Moratuwa. She is the global chairperson of WILAT, which is Women in Logistics and Transport, and founder chairperson and advisor of WILAT for Sri Lanka. Gaini is the immediate chairperson of Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, a fellow member of Institute of Supply and Materials Management, and also a board member of the Women's Chamber of Industry and Commerce. She has been a strong advocate of women empowerment and has received many awards and accolades for her career achievements. We are indeed very honored to have you with us today, Gaini. A very warm welcome to you. Our second panelist this evening is Mr. Dimantha Senviratne. Dimantha is the Group Chief Executive Officer of National Development Bank PLC. Having started his banking career at Sampath Bank, he counts for over 30 years of experience in the banking industry. Prior to NDB, he was the Director CEO of Pan Asia Banking Corporation and at the HSBC Group, where he had held key senior management positions, shouldering also Asian regional responsibility. Mr. Senviratne holds a BSc from the University of Sri Jayawardenepura and has successfully completed the High Potential Leadership Program at the Harvard Business School, Boston, USA in 2016. A senior fellow member of the Institute of Bankers and a past president of the Association of Professional Bankers Sri Lanka, he currently also serves as a director of Lanka Clear Private Limited, Credit Information Bureau of Sri Lanka, and at several subsidiaries of the NDB Group. This year, He was awarded as the best CEO banking sector. We are so honored to have you with us today, Dimanta. A very warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
We then have our next panelist, Mr. Udayana Vikramasuriya. Mr. Udayana Vikramasuriya is the founder of Cali Natural Farms Private Limited, which he initiated in October 2015. They specialize in a unique brand of tea known as the Cali Teas, which comes from a single garden in a rural village in the southern lowlands of Ceylon. Apart from his own ventures, Mr. Vikramasuriya has an extensive corporate and industry exposure covering apparel, development banking, FMCG, food and music sectors. In a career span of over 33 years, he has served as Director Surya Records, a full-time board member at Brandix, Chief Executive Officer of Activewear Cluster Mass Holdings, Assistant to General Manager at NDB Bank, and as a Senior Manager at Lever Brothers. His interests are in natural systems, strategy, innovation, technology, performance cultures, and people. We are very, very honored and so happy to have you with us and very warmly welcome you, Mr. Udayana Vikramasuriya. Last but not least, we have someone who's very close to our heart. That is Mr. Denzil Pereira. Denzil has served in the fields of marketing, branding and sales at Sri Lanka Insurance Corporation, Union Assurance, Hemas Consumer Brands, Marina Foods, and ACL Cables during his career of 15 years. Currently, he is attached to the largest conglomerate in Sri Lanka in the capacity of a general manager. Denzil holds his BSc Special in Marketing and a merit in his master's. He became a chartered marketer in 2009 and was awarded with the status of practicing marketer in 2010 by Sri Lanka Institute of Marketing. He's a brand and business turnaround strategist with a proven track record in local companies such as Marina Foods and Hemas Consumer Brands. He's also a brand coach and the current president of PIM Alumni. We are delighted and very happy to see you as a panelist today. Denzil, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
Once again, a very warm welcome to all four panelists, and over to you, Professor.
Thank you, Shiranti. Hi everyone, Wanakkam, Assalamu alaikum, good evening. It gives me immense pleasure once again to be with you all as the moderator, and let me thank PIMA first of all for this wonderful arranging of the fourth webinar in the series of webinars that we did as a response to the locking down experience. From the locking down to looking up for fresh opportunities, fresh possibilities, fresh initiatives. So the apt theme that we have picked for this time is thriving on the second wave. And we know for sure second wave has become far more dangerous from a medical point of view, from a healthcare point of view, and from a social point of view. So what should be our response? So from survival to sustained success. And I would propose we have to respond to the VUCA 1.0 from a VUCA 2.0 response. So what is VUCA 1.0? As we are much aware, it's all about volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So what should be our response? Vision, understanding, confidence, and agility. How can we do that as professionals? What should be the professional response to a planetary pandemic? That's what we are going to deliberate. And I am delighted to be in the middle of a galaxy of superstars. And I'm even more satisfied because they are all prestigious products of premier PIM MBA, and being the pioneer in MBA education. So we are very happy to share some of the products that we have sort of contributed to the society, and then to have a collective thought sharing with a view of doing something meaningfully for the socio-economic upliftment for our country. So we need to carry on, we need to move ahead with confidence. And this is where we need to have the right way of thinking in converting that into right way of doing and right way of delivering the desired results. So with that backdrop, may I propose we'll have a 3 to 4 rounds. So in round 1, I'll invite each panelist to share his or her perspectives with regard to a particular selected area. In round 2, I'll ask a probing question, and then they would have further opportunity to elaborate based on what they have shared. In the third round, it is all to you, my dear participants. You can raise your questions virtually. You can use the chat box option, and we would pick and choose the appropriate questions and pass it to the relevant panelists. You can mention the name of the panelist if you want to be very specific, but if you want to be general to ask an open-ended question where all would contribute, that option is always there, and we would wind up as we planned with a passing remark by each panelist. So with that game plan, they always say ladies first. So may I turn to Mrs. Gayani D. Alvis. I'm sure she is very popular in the electronic media, print media, social media, but few know the connection between PIM and her. In fact, ironically, she and her husband, Senior Professor Ajit D. Alvis, both did MBA together at PIM. In fact, from the grapevine, we came to know that she persuaded Ajit to join her in doing the MBA together. So, so may I ask Gayani to give us a perspective from the supply chain management? And we see the food is getting decayed in Dambulla, where there's a shortage of food in Colombo. So the food-related supply chain is a huge opportunity in front of us. So like that, how can we look at this pandemic from a supply chain point of view, globally, regionally, locally? Over to you, Gayani.
Thank you, Professor. I think it's part of a galaxy of stars, as you said, be part of this panel today. As we all know, COVID pandemic has really disrupted all our lives and livelihoods. And in the process, the whole supply chains have got disrupted. So we know it is actually logistics who has made the virus become a pandemic. So it is up to us to come out of the issue as well. So we all know traditionally the supply chains have been focusing mostly on cost efficiencies. And we were really looking at, in order to do that, we wanted to really look at single sourcing, optimizing our supply chains. So when some situation like this happened, which we call black swan situations, where, it was highly impactful, low probability, and we didn't know what to do with it, so that came as a big surprise for all of us. So how do we really now look at, now the COVID is going to be there till the vaccine is found. They say by next year, mid next year, we might see some light at the end of the tunnel. Even if it is the case, we should be able to, we should understand how to live with the COVID situation and manage our supply chain and our lives as well. So what can we do? Now, you started off by asking about the agriculture supply chain. So I'll start off with that and then move on to other areas where we had issues. I mean, we've been talking about this for the past 70 years. I mean, every successive government, whenever they come to power, they talk about food security, reducing the cost of living and all that. I wonder whether most of you may not be aware, but as per the 2018 statistics, we have spent 422 billion rupees on food and beverage imports into this country. And we all know for 30 to 40% of what is produced getting lost in the whole end-to-end supply chain, which we call post-harvest losses. And also, as per census and statistics, we also know 52% of our revenue, I mean, what we generate as our income is spent on our food. So this is the story of our lives in this country. So if you really look at a developed economy, this post-harvest loss is just less than 10%, single digit. So how can we really look at minimizing this so that we can really look at making our products affordable to people and freshness, and it is available at wherever that is being produced. So that is something that we need to really look at. So what we really need to understand is how do we really, you cannot, after something is harvested, you cannot look at preserving. You have to start from the beginning itself. You need to really look at when to harvest, what to harvest. I mean, educating the farmer is a very important aspect. You need to really educate them. You need to make them aware how to do good agricultural practices, the modern trends that are happening in the world, giving traceability. You have this emergence of organic farming and all that happening. How do we really look at all these new developments, emerging trends that are happening while doing all that? So we need to really understand how do we develop capacity among our farming community. How do you do that? And also during harvesting, how do we really look at the harvesting point itself, the excess crop that we have, how can we really preserve them? Do we have enough storage facility, cold storage facility? We don't have it at the moment, and we are in the process of discussing and developing facilities there. And also the transportation. Do we use proper storage and transportation? You know, you see all these gunny bag one on top of the other and how it is being transported. So can we use plastic crates? So it's just a simple solution, but how do we really make that? We have so many intermediaries in the whole process. How do we do that? So this is just a perennial problem that we have been having, but how do we really use proper supply chain management, professional understanding, and also techniques to do that? So this is one area that we need to really look at it. The other area is COVID also. I mean, everybody thinks about COVID as a, it's a crisis. It is a danger, true. But I think we also must look at it as an opportunity. Like the professor also said, that we need to look at new opportunities that are coming our way. World over, we've seen companies moving to new emerging areas. So we also saw in our own country, apparel industries moving to personal protective equipment. And recently the, illicit liquor manufacturing industry, what they have captured and all, they are going to use it in hand sanitizers. And we saw the new developments happening in our tea trade. I mean, our 37-year-old tea trade has been doing it physically, doing in the tea auction twice 2 days of the week. So they have now really digitized that, and now like entire tea auction is happening even post-COVID in an e-auction way. And also coconut, exchange also did the same thing. So there are a lot of things happening because of COVID. I would say digitalization, we were all talking about it, that COVID has expedited digitalization, because supply chain is all about giving visibility and transparency so that you know your end-to-end partners in the supply chain. It's a long chain. If you don't know who your suppliers, what are the vulnerable points in the entire end-to-end supply chain, you will not be able to deliver value to the customer. And so you need to really look at the emerging consumer trends that are happening because of the COVID situation. We saw a lot of the government sector coming into the, looking at things in a very creative way. If you look at in the port sector, all this time there was so much documentation that we were talking about, and now there are electronic delivery orders. Our private terminal operators, South Asia Gateway Terminal, now they have actually partnered with IBM and Maersk now on blockchain technology. So I think COVID has really expedited the way that we are managing our supply chain. So I see some opportunities that is coming our way. And because regionalization is also going to happen, because everybody has put all their eggs into one basket, the Chinese basket, now we see the risks that are happening. So we need to understand how do we really make use of that opportunity in the reshifting of the supply chain. When India is emerging as a regional manufacturing hub, can we become part of the global supply chain, tapping into that chain? Are some other things we need to talk about. So in the interest of time, I'll stop at that. Maybe at the next round, I'll talk about the rest of the things.
Thank you, Gaini, for that wonderful thought sharing. As we are aware, every crisis has a danger dimension, as an opportunity dimension. So there's a huge opportunity in front of us with regard to variety of supply chain horizons. So with that, let me move to Dimantha, coming from a veteran banking and finance experience. So Dimantha, could you share us your banking and financial perspective? How would you look at the thriving on second wave, the prospects with regard to assisting the small and medium scale enterprises, ensuring that we have economic revival, and then we would have prosperity? So how would you look at from a banker's point of view? Over to you, Dimantha. You need to unmute, Dimantha.
Thank you, Professor. First of all, I would like to thank PIMA and the PIM for providing me the opportunity to come as a panelist for very useful topical webinar. Talking about the banking industry, banking and finance altogether, and what we can do, it's good to get some understanding about the landscape of the banking industry. So we are talking about a banking industry where we have 14 trillion assets as at June 2020, and finance companies about 1.5 trillion. So altogether about 15.5 to 16 trillion asset base. If you look at the loans, bank industry is about 9 trillion rupees. Now, the first wave of COVID, we saw the economy contracting first two quarters, and then the predictions for this the whole year is about 1.7% negative by the central bank. Now, of course, the IMF and the World Bank numbers are a bit higher than this. However, the central bank's prediction is about 1.7 contraction. Now, with the second wave, we need to first identify what learnings we had from the first wave and how the banking system reacted to that and how we adjusted to that. Now, if you look at the growth, since despite all that, we saw the industry's liquidity levels are going up. Now, even all the industry deposit statistics have shown substantial growth. There are a couple of reasons. Maybe the customers may not have that much of opportunities to invest or much, or even to spend for that matter. On the other side, you would have seen the interest rates. The central bank also took several measures to propel the economic growth as well. So a couple of things that they did from the beginning of the year. For example, the interest rates were reduced by almost 250 basis points through about 4 interest rate cuts by the monetary board over the last 9 months. Then the statutory reserve requirement was also reduced by 300 basis points, again with the intention of releasing more money to the market so that the economy can grow in a situation like this. So as a result, the interest rates have come down substantially. Now the average weighted average lending rates are now hovering around 5.5 to 6%. Now these are lending rates that we have never seen in the past, and these are similar to the dollar lending rates that the rupee borrower can enjoy. Now I see this as an opportunity in a post-COVID or even during the COVID lockdown situation also, opportunity to make use of the funds and get into the growth area. Now, in doing so, the key element is the SMEs, as you correctly said. And as Gayani also mentioned, there are areas where the government also have supported more digitally driven economy. Now that's where even the payment and settlements department or the central bank, the Lanka and all have also driven into more cashless society by introducing the QR code platform for the payments, so that in a situation like this, you reduce the usage of cash and the payment channels all through the digital channels and that have been promoted. So what Jaini mentioned about customs department shifting to all their documents through a digital platform is the right way forward in a situation like this. So that again, I think all banks should get involved in that and then get into that. Some banks are yet to come into that platform, but I think it's as an industry, we need to get into that platform as soon as possible. There are some good silver linings also in the last 3 months after we came out from the first wave of COVID, Professor, that we have seen. For example, our trade deficit has contracted as a result of one is the drop in imports. For example, from a level of 14.6 billion imports, it has come down to 11.7 billion. So there's a contraction of 2.9 billion in the import side, whereas the export side, it's about 1.6 billion. So all in all, there's a trade deficit reduction of 1.4 billion. So this is one positive thing that I see. Apart from that, the exports have grown. Now, average export level has year on year, there is a growth in the month of July and also month of September. Even if you look at the worker remittances, now worker remittances were averaging around $500 million a month in the last 3 years. But however, from June onwards, we have seen it's going up to about $700 million a month, 708 million as at September. Now, there are some reasons as well. I think one is that earlier the worker remittances that was part of that were remitted through non-bank channels. Hundial and the non-bank channels are now all converted to the banking channel. So that is one positive movement. Apart from that, there can be some people who are losing their jobs, so their retrenchment funds or whatever is also getting added to this. But I think more importantly, it's coming through the proper channels that has reflected in the numbers. So like that, I think country also have opportunities to capture the supply chain diversification that other major countries have moved into. And again, I think I made that point, China factor. Now, instead of only China, I think there are opportunities, and that's where Sri Lanka is in a better location. Now, we know India is in lockdown, much severe situation than us. So is Bangladesh. So as a result, Sri Lanka got some of the government orders and several other export orders. And I know personally, there are a lot of factories who are getting new orders, not only limited to the garment industry, because of this diversification of the supply chains. So these are some of the opportunities we need to use, and also the opportunities that we are going to finance as banks for the SME sector. So probably when it comes to the next round, Professor, I will discuss more about the SME side, how banks can support, because that is the backbone of the economy. So how we can support that.
Thank you, Dimanta. So it's not so doom and gloom. There's some light at the end of the tunnel. So we can be a little positive about economic growth. Even though we are currently having a negative year-on-year economic growth, I think we still can make it, as someone said, not a U-turn, but perhaps a V-turn, at least some turn. So let me turn to my former boss, Udena Vikramsuri. I have a variety of ways of introducing himself, and my personal way of introducing him is the person who persuaded me to convert from engineering to human resource management at Unilever. So Udena, I know you want to introduce yourself as a corporate leader turned farmer. I know you are very much into farming. These days you are passionate about organic farming. So perhaps you can give Udena a non-corporate perspective about the whole pandemic. How would be a professional response as a non-corporate professional? So in terms of innovation, in terms of farming, in terms of alternate ways of contributing to the well-being, over to you then. You need to unmute.
Hello, is that okay? Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of the panel. Rather than making a statement, I'd like to just pose a question at a very micro level, at a very individual level. You know, when the first wave hit us, or when it first hit us, we were worried about many things, and food was one of those things. Kayani also very aptly mentioned about food and wastage. You know, lots of talk and chatter about growing our own food, urban gardens, lots of posts on social media. And once things settled, have we forgotten about it? And once, you know, the home delivery system, you know, logistics solutions at a micro level started, did we forget about it? And if so, if the answer is yes, as I said, I don't want to make statements, I'll pose questions. If the answer is yes, what does it say about us? Are we a set of people who behave very well under pressure, under fear? Are we short-term thinking, or are we a long-term thinking set of people? And at a very individual level. And because we're talking about, national development, I'd like to link this question to a macro level now. And again, about food. Long years ago, if you look at Cuba, it's a classic example. During the times of, Che Guevara, sugar was considered gold, and Cuba was trading with Russia, and Russia was also in full bloom. So Cuba used to export sugar, and Russia used to give back rice, wheat, tractors, and fuel and all that stuff. And in the 80s, Cuba had more tractors per hectare than California. So that says where Cuban farming was. 1991, Soviet collapse. Cuba's whole trading structure collapsed. Within a 3-year period, the average Cuban's calorie intake dropped by 40%. And that's how poor, or that's how bad the situation was. Cuba turned inwards and became a complete organic, self-sufficient farming community. In 4 decades, they've not used any chemicals in their farming structure. So this is really a situation where they had no option but to look after themselves, because embargoes from US, etc., continued. So if one were to say, okay, under fear, under no option, but they still found a solution. Let's shift to an even smaller country, because Cuba's population is less than 12 million. Look at Bhutan, less than 1 million people. One of the few countries with 0 deaths in COVID, 32 something, people being treated at the moment. And one of the reasons is the king took a decision that Bhutan will be a country with 0 deaths of COVID. And that was a clearly stated policy. Bhutan is also a country that's negative carbon today, negative CO2 emissions. It's a country whose tourism is driven by a very niche type of tourism. If you're visiting Bhutan, you have to pay on top of all the other, usual costs of travel and hotels. You have to pay a minimum $200 a day per head. And that's the way they pick on the tourists that need to come. So if Cuba was a scenario that was driven under pressure, Bhutan is, I think, the opposite to me of a country driven by specific, decisive strategies. So I go back to my questioning mode. Is this time apt for us to rethink for ourselves at a very individual level of what is best for us, what is right for us, without trying to copy someone else across industries? I'm just taking food as an example. It could be tourism, it could be any form of industry, and decide what is best for us and tenaciously drive that initiative to deliver results, and rethink for ourselves what we should do. So I'm really posing questions of, is this the right time? Or is this a good time for us to rethink the whole model, rethink ourselves in this current context? Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Indeed, thought-provoking. So let me open it up for the participants to think over and for them to come back with their responses. So finally, we have Densil. In fact, he was doing a behind-the-screen work in the past, but I invited him to come to the limelight because being the leader of the largest postgraduate alumni in Sri Lanka, and it's an awakened giant. Having produced 300 plus CEOs, 3,000 plus senior managers, 30,000 plus trained professionals one way or the other during the 30 plus years of existence of PIM. So Densil, you being the leader of PIMA, and also you're coming from sales and marketing background. Perhaps you can shed light from a sales and marketing point of view, thriving on second wave. Unmute.
Sorry. Thank you very much for having me, sir. And yes, my experience as a marketer, which I started 15, 16 years back and then moved into sales and various other disciplines. I think when we look at it from a marketing point of view today, we see that the market needs certain products, certain services to maintain their lifestyle. Now, we can see the fall of luxury brands, we can see the fall of semi-luxury brands, and we can see the rise of F&B and agri-related products, medicine, likewise. And also among all these things, we can see the Sri Lankanness is coming out, and people actually valuing what and appreciating what we have. But amidst all these, we can see that there is internal struggle. The struggle is that sales is highly target driven, whereas marketing and branding is very long term driven thing. So we can see that okay, there are. I mean, in the private sector, especially, you are driven with targets and you have volume, value, reach, etc. So you have to now come to a point where you need to think of something else, maybe from growth to survival, from maybe from attraction to maybe maintenance, and maybe from going behind targets to maybe production to meet the requirements. Likewise, especially Gaini was talking about sourcing. Sourcing has become a very critical issue with certain issues related to shipping restrictions, etc. So there is a struggle, but at the same time, we can see a lot of organizations have realized that as much as they need to achieve their targets, they also need to take care of their people. And they have switched on to the survival model, and they very categorically say that you maintain your business and service, help the consumer, help the customer. So we can see in this backdrop what kind of opportunities we have as Sri Lanka. We have, for example, government has decided to bring down the pharmaceutical products from 150 billion to about 90 billion. So there's 60 billion that we need to make in Sri Lanka, if I'm correct. Then also in this context, we see certain industries are growing, like for example, glove industry, and then solid tie industry, which is a big industry in Sri Lanka, which has never been highlighted in our statistics. We always talk about ready-made garments and tourism. So I think the time has come for us to look at alternatives. Also, as Udayana very correctly said, organic side of it, organic food. I mean, we are next to India, and we can't compete with a giant like that in non-organic food sector. But when it comes to organic, we definitely have edge, and we have gained the reputation and credibility in the world. With the pandemic, of course, we are more like land, so that we go for the kill and then we rest a bit. So during that rest, I think we got a second wave, and now they expect the third wave to come. So I think we need to have branding aspect in certain things we do now, as on top of satisfying delivering services, taking care of people. We need to look at how we can brand, like Udena very correctly said, how Bhutan charging $200, and of course we need to drive Sri Lanka tourism, brand in Sri Lanka to that point. Probably next year there will be no traveling in the world, so maybe we can get ready. We should take this time, I think, as a learning period, development period for Sri Lanka. Because, for example, if I may ask this question, Coke was launched back in 1885, and Coke became #1 brand in the world. Whether it's good or bad, I'm not going to talk about it. But during round about the same time, there's a brand launched in Sri Lanka, and we know it's none other than Elephant House. So where Elephant House reached and where Coca-Cola reached, even though we criticize this brand up to a certain extent, you can see the Coke. I mean, it went way beyond the product, and it basically augmented certain things into it. So lot of tourists who are coming to Sri Lanka come to see Sri Lankan elephants, and we have a brand called Elephant House. So I think that's one example I'm taking, that we can take it out of the country, and I think it's in the right direction now. And so pretty much that about branding sides. And then if we look at sales, now we are getting into new sectors, and it needs certain amount of effort in sales. So I think sales professionals will have to relook at the technical aspect of them, and also their capabilities to cater these new industries which are coming out. And if we take Sri Lanka, for example, we are talking of manufacturing agri products, getting into agri sector. So how we can brand it, how we can bring in certifications to these, because we have a lot of products which are good in quality, but they can't reach out to the other markets in the world, for the simple reason that their standards are not in place. Maybe They are not ready to be exported. They are not ready to be sold in other markets. So there is a lot that we can look at. And I think with all that, we also need to know that the importance of, as Udana very correctly said, pursuing on something, continuous effort behind something until we reach a goal. And then also we need to think big, because we are an island. So a lot of people say that we have island mentality, which does not take us a long way. So we need to basically put all the good things with us, good things that we have, and then brand it, maybe starting from all the way from brand in the country, then brand in products, and taking it to the global market. This time that we have got, I consider it as a time that was given for us to basically revamp the whole process, relook at things, and then appreciate what we are inherited with, and then move on from that point. That's how I see it.
Okay. Thank you, Denzil. In fact, it reminds me Sri Lanka as a brand where late Professor Udita Lienege, my mentor, coined the term compact, authentic, and diverse. It's Sri Lanka which can give a compact experience, authentic experience, and a diverse experience, like a land like no other. So are we really branding it sufficiently? In fact, if you look at a country like Malaysia, for the past 25 years, they had a consistent tagline, Malaysia truly Asia, where we every year change the tagline and we tinker with the tagline. So that's a fundamental question that we need to tackle. So with that, thank you for the first round, very interesting, inspiring thought sharing. So let me move to the second round, back to Gaini. Gaini, you mentioned that we need alternative supply routes moving beyond China dependency. In fact, if you look at a simple thing like coriander powder, and there was this idea that we can grow in Sri Lanka, and we have started growing, but the harvest is yet to come. And if you look at the potential of manufacturing pharmaceuticals in Sri Lanka, I know that there's a plan to have a massive pharma park in Hambantota, and there's a biotechnology project coming as a second phase of a nanotechnology project in Technocity Homagama. So like that, how significant the local manufacturing in the broader context of supply chain in this pandemic? If you can elaborate further.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. I think you raised a very good point. Unfortunately, Sri Lanka is mostly a service-based economy, right? I mean, 52% of it is service-based. So I think GDP. So if you really look at Sri Lanka, I think if you really look at the backward integration, even during COVID situation, when we were trying to develop masks, right? We had problem in sourcing our raw materials, the materials, right? So there were issues. So I think without, like Udena said, I mean, we should not have knee-jerk reactions. We need to really carefully looking at the future, understand what are the areas that we have resources within the country, what we need to really focus, the areas that we need to focus, we need to identify. I think there is some work happening on developing an industrial policy for the country, and different provinces, they have identified depending on the resources available, and they will have like a kind of a main industry happening with backward integration in place and all that. But it should not be flavor of the year or flavor of the regime. You know, it has to happen as a long-term thing, irrespective of whichever government come into power. So there should be a focused effort in setting up the areas that we are really having expertise as well as the resources in place. So value addition is the way forward. I mean, gone are the days that if you really look at most of the natural resources that we have in the country, we just export as raw form. I think what is important for us is to understand how we can do value addition and become a supplier for the global supply chains. I mean, we all know we are in the busiest east-west shipping route in Sri Lanka, our ports. So therefore, we can easily expand our operations in the country by selectively identifying areas that we can set up our manufacturing operations, and we don't need to develop everything. Gone are the days that you have to do everything within a country. we have to look at how do we really tap into these global supply chain networks that we have. We all know, Foxconn, the contract manufacturer of Apple, now has already shifted Apple iPhone 11 manufacturing to Foxconn in Chennai. They had a facility. They've already committed $1 billion investment to set up a facility in Hyderabad and in other places in India. So, I mean, these things are happening. Are we ready to, tap into these global supply chain where possible? I mean, this is one example. And most of the countries are now feeling the effect of putting all their eggs into one basket. That's a Chinese basket. So now they are looking at China plus one strategy. How do we really look at these areas? I think there should be a careful evaluation of the opportunities where we have the capability to tap into these global supply chains. So that is what I feel. So pharmaceutical industry is one area that we can look at it. Again, 80% of the active pharma APIs are produced in China. We get most of our pharmaceuticals from India and Pakistan. Some of the operations now we are going to locally manufacture. Saline, even simple salines we used to import. Now I think last week we saw some factory coming up in the central province. So we need to really look at what is possible. Maybe API level we may not be able to manufacture locally, but how can we really look at carefully identifying industries that we can do value addition and operate, and will help us to ensure some kind of self-reliance in this country.
Okay. I think the key word is self-reliance. At least if we can have a step-by-step approach towards that. And we are talking about the King Parakumba era, where we even exported rice to other countries. So I think it's a case of making some significant steps towards that. A lot of food for thought for the decision makers and the policy implementers. So may I now turn to Dimantha once again. Dimantha, let me take a very critical standpoint about banks. Sorry to do this, because we hear from the social media, print media, electronic media, the SME voice, or the people who are dependent on the bankers for their survival and for their success. And some say, the banks might say, we ruin your future, or our interest is in your pocket, or bank with a hole in the heart, or whatever the ways in terms of they are more interested in their growth, their year-on-year profitability. So how would you look at from a constructive point of view? We are there to have a coexistence with the small and medium scale enterprises. True enough that you all are not doing charity all the time, but at least coexistence, co-survival, co-creation, collaboration for a better economy which is growing. So what are some constructive thoughts about encouraging the SME sector in Sri Lanka?
Thank you, Professor, for that very thought-provoking and again timely question. Yes, the SMEs construct the backbone of the economy, as I mentioned earlier. And whether we are doing enough to get the SMEs up from the current level is, I have mixed feelings here. I mean, some banks are doing this to their best, but whether the entire financial industry is doing that, that's a question that I think we need to leave. But who can do, we need to see how best we can do that. So in that context, the banks have done certain things. Now, for example, soon after the COVID situation, the central bank also came up with one is the moratoriums that was offered. And I think banks have gone beyond those moratoriums to support not only the SMEs, but the impacted clients. Now, subsequently, there was a Saubhagya loan scheme, or the COVID Renaissance loan scheme, that was again supported by the central bank. Now there again about 170 billion rupees worth of loans have been approved. Of that, about 150 have been dispersed. Again, targeting the SME sector, because the loan size were capped at 25 million per customer. And what I understand is about 63,000 such SME clients have been facilitated through that. And that's where I think that's why my bank also have done a leading role there. We are the fourth largest in terms of dispersing about 18 billion worth of facilities among SME clients. Now, this is about 2-year loans, but now recently there was a indication given that the grace period also would get extended by another 3 months with the current second wave that has come out. Now, these are some of the funding to ensure that they manage the current situation, because this is only to fund their current salary payments, working capital, but not the long-term investment that they're supposed to make to continue this and grow this business from current level. Now, that's where a funding scheme, credit assessment should be there. I think we should move out from the traditional way of looking at the securities and look at the cash flow based lending and support this. Now, apart from that, I think there's an entrepreneurial element also should come out from the SMEs. Unfortunately, what we are seeing is the Sri Lankan mindset is you follow the same thing that sometimes is successful, you follow the same. But if you can promote the entrepreneurs to come out and also explore the export opportunities, the market opportunities, that's where we create a platform. Now, that is where, again, I can share one example, what my bank has done. Soon after the first COVID wave, we realized that so many vendors came to our homes, selling, either it can be vegetables, fruits, or fish, or the bakery items and all. But where is the platform for them to showcase this? So what we came up was a product proposition called Jayagamu Sri Lanka. Under Jayagamu, we introduced a trading platform for these vendors to display their products and meet the seller and the buyer. So that actually we tied up with Daras, which is a subsidiary of Alibaba. And also that's for the local market, but also with Code 365, it's a Sri Lankan based company who has developed this platform, showcasing their products to the outside world, export market. And I'm very happy to see more than 5,000 of such clients have been registered. And Daras platform, about 1,000 of them are now trading in this platform. So that's actually the future as well, where you have a trading platform to showcase that. Apart from that, we came up with a further solution like tying up with Maersk, one of the leading shipping lines, to provide all their export destinations and support from that side, introduction of their major buyers to Sri Lankan exporters. Then to encourage innovators, we came up with a loan product, again supporting the innovators. And then we also introduced the ERP solution, Enterprise Resource Planning solution, where these SMEs would know where their stock levels are, their data controls, and also their salary accounts and all. And giving that access to the bank would also eliminate the earlier risks of giving credit without proper financials, because the banks also have the view on their level of stocks, level of debtors. So that ERP solution, when that is combined with a credit product, I think that gives comfort. And then without security, without property mortgages and all, banks also can take certain flexible credit decision. So this platform is working very well. And my team, my SME team, is quite active in promoting this. Apart from that, another area that I think we should seriously think of is the digital platforms to take these banking products out to the market. So that's where the QR-based payment that I mentioned earlier can really facilitate all these small-time SMEs. Now the QR-based, up to 25,000 you can pay if it is from another bank. But if it is from our own bank, you can pay, there's no limit to the transaction value. And QR-based, the transaction commission compared to card commission is much lower than that. So the vendor will get the maximum out of a transaction. So there again, there's a QR code drive that is happening. Again, NDB is in the forefront trying to promote this, because that would be the future in the payment platform. If we are to live with this situation and come out from that, I think the less cash society is important. And these are the digital platforms that we can use to promote these SMEs. Professor.
Thank you, Dimanta, for that encouraging response with some hope and some foresight. So let me turn to Udena. Udena, I know you are a strong advocate of citizens' responsibilities rather than government bashing all the time. Are we doing our responsibility? For example, this face masks are we really wearing as a face mask? I was watching television news and a police constable is screaming at a person, make a muavarnayak misak mukavarnayak. Some people just close the mouth without covering the nose and fully exposed to the environment and spreading the germs to the environment. So basically, are we playing the role of a responsible citizen in Sri Lanka? I know you had a very popular social media campaign called Yoda, Yoda.lk, where you highlighted the salient contributions by individuals. Over to you, Dana, the citizens' response to COVID-19.
Thank you. My view is in any form, if you look at national development, corporate development, family, whatever, that it's to do with individuals taking their own responsibility, and individuals are responsible to drive a nation. Now, I've seen posts and comments and reports that, for example, in Japan, they're going to live with COVID. I don't think we should try and even imitate, because we're not Japan. We don't have the discipline. We are by nature, between COVID-1 first wave and second wave, I think we aptly saw who we are. We are a typical, Navagirunat Banchun type of nation. And that's who we are. I don't think we should blame ourselves. I don't think we should find fault with ourselves for that. That's in our DNA. Having said that, if we don't take responsibility for our own actions, and if we don't decide for ourselves what's good for us, what's good for the country, what's good for the company we are working in, we're going to cause major disaster, and much bigger than where we are now, for the entire country. And ultimately, it's going to come and bite us back. Overall, it's not just going to bite someone else, but it's going to bite us back. And I think the interdependency of ourselves, we have seen very clearly through COVID. And I think it's time, if I were to make a statement, I dislike making motherhood statements. I'd rather pose questions. And the question I would like to ask is, if we had been more responsible, could we have avoided this? And if we could have, why didn't we? Is it because, we don't take life serious until we are really pushed to the wall? Is that who we are? And if that's who we are, and if you're a happy-go-lucky type of nation, do we need to really change at this moment of time until so-called normalcy returns, or this is the new normal? So in this context, how are we going to behave? How are we going to, what are we going to do at an individual level? If I am to answer that question for myself, taking precautions is a no-brainer. It has to happen. And, simple stuff of, you said about the mask, you said about the distance. I think distance is a very difficult situation, because first of all, we are not used to it. And number two, practically, it's not easy to do. But then, are we going to live in this context where the virus is going to increase in multiples like it has in the past? Or are we going to say, I am responsible to take action for this without blaming the government, without blaming the health authorities, without blaming X, Y, and Z? So I come back to where I started in the first round. Think for yourself what you should do. We should all think for ourselves what we should do and just act on that, rather than, putting a lot of posts on social media. I'm not a fan of that. People wish their spouses and children for their birthdays on social media, living in the same house. That's common feature. If you follow social media, what value does it bring to us? Versus just make one decision of one thing that I believe is right, and I'm going to change from tomorrow and stick with it. I think overall, all of us will benefit a lot more.
Thank you, Dana. Interesting and intellectually insightful as usual. So may I now turn to Densil once again. Densil, you recently wrote a very interesting article, STP plus segmenting, targeting, and positioning, and to go beyond. So how do you relate that approach to the pandemic? I mean, living with pandemic. So what is the message for the marketers?
Yeah, actually, I was
Densil,
hello,
it looks like he
hello.
is, yes.
I think I'm connected. Yeah. So, Professor, as you ask about the STP and beyond that another P profile, I was basically thinking of the fundamentals that we've learned and practiced in marketing over the years. Especially, we say that marketing begins with segmenting, targeting, and positioning. And in between, we don't think of actually the profile, that we need to think of the profile. So today, the things have slightly changed, and we are talking of, for example, new wave marketing. We are talking of 12Cs, etc. But in terms of profiling, I think of course, I need to get back to that, but I like to talk of, for example, in the recent past, what we have seen, like you asked this valid question from the banking sector, what they have done collectively. So I think it's time for marketers to compete than competing. Like in marketing, we do attraction and attacking. We attack and we attract. We attract profiles, right profiles for us, and we attack competitors. So I think the time has come for us to compete and to do it together. And compete in what I mean is this: that we need to be able to, for example, support the industries that we are in. For example, in the recent past, like last week, I saw a post by Burger King asking consumers to buy from any fast food chain outlet. It could be McDonald's, KFC, anything, because they are saying that there are a lot of people who are fed by these outlets. They're talking about the not the consumers, but also their employees. So they're saying you buy it from anywhere, it doesn't matter as long as you buy from one of these outlets, because we are feeding to a whole lot of families. Likewise, you could see like we are our ready-made garment sector feeding into a lot of families, but when it comes to certain things, we have to be careful at this point of time. As Udena said, we need to know what exactly we are doing. So I'm actually thinking I'm trying to talk about something like humanizing marketing. We need to humanize marketing. The message is very clear, which has come from the nature or wherever you think it has come from. The mother nature was dying, and now basically we are basically cornered, and we are inside, we are stuck inside, and mother nature is regaining her glory. And what it means is that we need to humanize marketing. In for example, Kotler was trying to talk about humanizing marketing, and there are so many people who have spoken of this, but when you read into it, you see that what they're saying is that the same thing, that you identify the customer, identify and anticipate what they want and deliver and make them happy at a profit. Same story. So what I'm saying is humanizing marketing is not you make a brand which looks like a human. Humanizing marketing is not about letting consumers to create content of your marketing campaign. Humanizing marketing is not about letting the target profile to, for example, co-create it with the company. No, what I'm saying is we need to go a step beyond that, and we need to tell, okay, we need to, for example, we need to be empathetic. We can see credit card companies giving offers to go and stay in hotels, 50% off, 60% off. Probably the card holder is actually hospitalized, lying in a bed. And at that point of time, what he would want is maybe a discount on his hospital bill. And we have the technology to enable this, but we are not doing it. And we are talking of triple bottom line, but we actually use it as a sales tool, and it's not inbuilt, it just bolt on. So we need to really get into it and make it happen in the ground level. And we should not, I would say, take in consumers, because we have this word called consumer. We refer to people. People are not some bunch of creatures born to consume. So we are promoting consumption over and over and over again. And I see some kind of mismatch in this. We are, on the one hand, we are talking of triple bottom line, sustainability, etc. And on the other hand, we are talking of, increase in consumption, motivating people to eat more, consume more. So I think these two are not matching anymore. So we have gone somewhere terribly wrong. We need to basically find that fine point where we can satisfy the needs and wants. And I think instead of anticipation, we should come to the adaptation now. And instead of identification, you should come to an indicating point where, okay, this is enough. If you use this much, it's enough. And also we need to demarket in the sense that as much as we empathizing with people at this point of time, saying that, okay, we are the best, maybe the hospital brand, we are the best bank, we are the best telecommunication brand, and so be careful, wash your hands, wear the mask, all that is the same message. But instead of that, if you can say, okay, these are the times that you should you use your data, or these are the times that, reduce the consumption of data because it might be harmful to you. Okay, this is the optimum amount of toothpaste you should use. This is the amount of washing detergent you should use. Likewise, we need to come to a true humanizing approach if you are really serious about this. And along with that, I think we can also brand Sri Lanka to be quite different and unique in the world map. We are talking of Bhutan, we are talking of Israel people, but I think the time has come for us to do some nation branding based on authenticity. We are inherited with so many good things, but just that we are not really confident on what we have. We are not really happy, and we are not very proud of what we have. So I think this time is really to build a resilient nation which can basically stand tall among any other nation under any circumstances. And that global reputation we've actually gained in, and we lost it for the very reason that Udena mentioned. So I think as far as STPP is concerned, we need to look at global markets now. We need to look at global markets. We need to put up brands which can go global, and the support system, the infrastructure has to be there. For example, we are a country, we're talking of brands, but we are not registered in YICA to see whether, how when you get registered in one country, whether, for example, if you want to register it in European Union for organic products, you'll have to go one country by another. So the system has to be, I think, developed in such a way that we facilitate SME sector. For example, in the SME sector, we know, like, we are professional marketing, brand marketing people who would work for a salary, and our free times we would, like, some people I see, they are posting pictures of what they eat, etc. Up to them. But what I'm saying is, if we can come together and join hands and encourage or support the SME sector, because they can't afford to hire a brand manager, for example. So we can come up as individuals, and we can help them out to basically market their product, position their product, identify the right profile. I think that is the approach that we can take, and the time has come for us to really, get into the core of it and make a difference. That's how I see it.
Okay, thank you, Denzel. In fact, humanizing marketing, that's an interesting endeavor that you can also embark on. And also, for me, the bottom line is being brilliant on basics, in giving a quality product or a service at an affordable price, isn't it? So we need to look at how to ensure humane results in terms of whatever the enterprise that we are engaged in. So with that, let's conclude the second round. And now it is over to the participants to post your questions. And I have already got some interesting questions. First question is to Gayani. In fact, to shorten the question posed by Shehan, it says that even while the first COVID wave was on, we were talking about agriculture sector related supply chain. And the professionals can share ideas and they can give solution. But what Shehan is asking, Gayani, is that, so what's the platform where all these professional advisors can be pooled and directed towards relevant authorities? I think it's a way of channeling the professional recommendations and expertise towards viable solutions which needs to be implemented. Any thoughts on that, guy?
Professor, I think PIM being the nation's thought leaders, I think we ourselves can do that. I think as an action from this session, I mean, the sessions that we have done in the past also, I mean, we can collate all our responses and suggestions that we are talking about, because there are a lot of valuable suggestions and ideas came in from this webinar and the previous webinars. I think we should cluster all these ideas for the problems that we are experiencing in this country, and put into those areas, and we should actually submit as an action plan from to the government. And also, I think, as you know, like you're also part of the committee, the NSF, National Science Foundation, is organizing a research conference next year. I don't know whether it gets shifted because of COVID. I mean, there are a lot of research papers are being presented on the issues and the actions that have been taken and the proposed areas. I think these are the kind of conferences where we can actually share our views, and then the government can really be submitted. I think that can be something that we can look at. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Gani. In fact, PIM can always be the channel where we can collate these ideas. We had been doing it even in the past. We had been organizing roundtables with regard to bringing in the key policy makers and then the thought leaders. The challenge here is, let me be very frank with you, there's an execution gap, which is a global phenomena. Great grand strategies are not converted into a great action. So then the strategies are confined to multicolored spiral bound volumes and volumes of books confined to a cupboard. So that is where we need to change. We need to ensure that action orientation, actions bring results. So the thinking should get converted into viable, practical actions. So let me look at the questions once again. The next question, perhaps Udena might be able to shed some light. Udena, the question is, we feel there's no proper regulatory mechanism in Sri Lanka to stop toxic materials / fertilizer, etc. All knows that the how much chemical being thrown to vegetables coming from up country. So basically the question is, no one has taken the lead to minimize the toxic material. So in other words, some regulation with regard to fertilizing. Any thoughts on that?
As I mentioned, when I got picked up for this panel, I said I'm not an expert farmer, so I don't know enough about the regulatory framework to talk about. Having said that, in the same tone that I spoke during this whole session, let me try and convert that question back to ourselves, point the finger to ourselves. I think if we start by saying, look, is food grown with chemical inputs good or bad for us? And then we say, okay, I am not going to consume that, but it's going to come at a higher cost, but in the long term, I'll probably reduce my medical costs and insurance costs. I think the starting point is there. For me, I'll relate a very simple story. For me, the whole thrust of, organic food is good is something that we all know. But it struck me about 7 years ago when I used to, in my previous life in corporate, when I used to visit factories, I used to, in the latter part of my career, I used to take a day off and visit, the homes of 3 or 4 people who worked in the factory. So I had this habit of morning breakfast at one of the operators' houses, technicians' houses, evening tea, so on and so forth. And in Polonnaruwa, I was seated in a rural village talking to the father of a sewing operator. And then I was saying, about CKD and the use of chemical. And then his response was, and then I said, "Behet gahana එක නැවැත්තුවොත් හොඳ නැද්ද?" He said, "Oh, prashnayak," because he had used, and they call it tel behet. We decided 3 times over, and still, couldn't get rid of the insecticide. So when I said, "Isn't it good for you to stop this?" And his response was very, very enlightening. He said, "You give me an alternative." He's not interested in regulation, etc. And he said, I'd rather farm, make some money, eat and die, rather than I die in hunger. So his question was very, very insightful. He said, you give me an alternative. Don't tell me, don't do this. Give me an alternative. And that's when I realized, it's better to do something than talk of what is wrong around us. Because there are tons of things that's wrong. There are tons of things that need to be fixed. There are tons of things that government has to do. But if we just pick one thing that we decide we're going to do, and if it's say good food, chemical-free food, and if you start tomorrow by saying, okay, I'm only going to consume chemical-free food, I think, and then once you see the benefits, if you can convince one more person and another person and another person, a movement, I think it was Ken Robinson who said a movement starts when one person begins to move. When one person moves, a movement starts. That's the commencement of a movement. Thanks to Steve Jobs, I think a lot of us think of changing the world, but we don't think of changing ourselves. So I, as much as I don't know enough to talk about regulatory framework, my response is to turn inwards and say, if you believe it's good for you, start consuming organic food. And there is a whole world beyond organic food as to what it does to the soil, how, in fact, there's a lot of literature and practical work on regenerative farming, on soil food webs, of how agriculture actually helps solve the whole CO2 emission issue. How animal husbandry, which everybody talks about, cows, raising cows being bad for the environment, how it actually can be a positive aspect in solving the CO2 issue. So in the same tone I've been speaking, I'd say, start consuming organic food at your home. The world will be a better place.
Thank you, Dana. And as they say, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. And someone was telling me he is spending extra money in buying organic food because the hospitalization is far more expensive. So interesting, because the paradigm is that we just look at very narrowly, but if you look at the broader perspective, staying healthy versus paying money for medicines, it's a kind of like a two sides of the same coin. Okay, so may I turn back to the questions once again. Next question is to Dimantha. Dimantha, I think it's too straightforward, but I don't know whether you'll be comfortable. Dimantha, was the 4% loan scheme effective?
Okay. Professor, I think yes, this is, I think they're referring to the Saubhagya loan scheme that Central Bank came up with. Now, this is a refinance loan scheme where customers in effect would pay 4%. However, Central Bank will reimburse the bank in terms of the funding costs, because when this was launched, the bank's funding cost was much higher than the 4%. Even now, it is higher than the 4%. So that is where I earlier mentioned about 180 billion funds have been approved, and about 150 billion by the central bank have been already dispersed. That's where I mentioned that even NDB also have approved and dispersed about 18 billion. So I think we are the fourth largest in terms of disbursement. Now, when you look at the total banking sector loan book of say 9 trillion, one can argue that 180 billion is quite a minute figure there. But we need to look at effectively where it has gone. And that's where more than 60,000 small business units, and this average loan size, if you look at, is somewhere around 7 to 8 million rupees, the average loan size for each customer. So that way it has gone effectively to the needy areas to ensure that they sustain this particular shock for some time. But it's not going to support them, as I mentioned, for new investments. So you need to have a new investment, but this is to sustain paying employee salaries, making sure that at least they manage during this lockdown period and they come out from that. We can't simply let them go because they lost their sole source of income. So that is where it's effective. And you need to also consider Sri Lanka is a developing country and we don't have that much of resources. Unlike some other large economies, they have basically dumped so much of money into the system to support these. But in such a scenario, Sri Lanka even coming out of this with arrangement is also good. Part of these 4% funds are also backed by a credit guarantee from the central bank. Now, that is very important. Where there was a segment that banks were reluctant to lend, and now that, and that was actually partly SLBA was also proposing this for the central bank to come up with a credit guarantee scheme. So the part of this loan scheme is backed by a credit guarantee up to 50%. So that helps the banks to take that extra level of credit risk to provide some of those who are a bit high in terms of the risk parameters, but to lend so that they can come out from that. So in that way, I think that is effective, but it's how you use that. So it's up to the SMEs also to ensure that these funds are used for the appropriate purpose that it is intended for.
Okay. Thank you, Devin. So it has, I mean, say, both parties should act responsibly in order to get the best out of it. So that's your message in crispy manner. Okay. Next question is to Densil.
Yes.
Most of the professionals speak on targeting on exports. Has the local market being served? Shouldn't we be focusing on that? So in other words, exports versus local market being served. How would you look at Densil?
Well, actually, right now in this context, we can see a lot of people are trying to look at local manufacturing because of the pressure that we got on balance of payment. But prior to that, we didn't have that kind of an approach. These are very high-level policy decisions taken over the last 70 years. People who have ruled this country. These are macro-level policies which were taken. For example, we had a nice system of making local fabrics, local apparel, and then it was all trashed and basically demolished. And I met these people who are involved in these industries, they cried. They said, sir, me kulu gedi වලින් ගහලා කඩලා දැන් මේ මොකද simple decision taken to basically reduce all the taxes, all the levies that was imposed on imported raw material. So certain decisions have been taken by certain people in certain eras to establish local businesses and local industries. At the same time, on another era, by someone else, they have changed those policies. So even today, the biggest problem we have is local, especially medium scale entrepreneurs and businessmen. They want to invest in certain sectors, but they are not sure at the end of this tenure what will happen during the next period. Is there a guarantee on them? Is there assurance that their businesses can succeed and continue? So I think that question has to be answered at very high level. What kind of a plan we have as a nation? What kind of securities we have provided to local entrepreneurs? And then are we only supporting the big ones? Aren't we supporting the medium scale ones, small scale ones? So for example, we are talking of quality. Now, I met a person who was talking very high about the national flag he has, which was bought like 35 years back, which was manufactured by maybe Tulhiri or latex, whatever. And he's asking, so we are importing flags now. Now, you saw recently what happened when a particular person was trying to develop local flags. Someone was trying to pinpoint on a small error on that print. Instead of appreciating the small efforts, we are, as a nation, we are trying to basically criticize things. I think that has come to our blood because we have been under three nations from 1505, and then we thought that we got the freedom, and then we started rallying around certain parties, certain people against the government. It started in north, started in south, and we were not thinking of being independent, being adding value to the nation, doing our part. Instead, we thought we can find a place to shine if we criticize. So you can see these hypocritic feelings, hypocritic reactions coming all the way, every nook and corner of this country. So what we need to do is we need to see where we can start this, and where we can support this system, and that blessing has to come from the top. They have to take a decision, and then instead of criticizing things, instead, like you said, very correctly said, small steps matter, and that's what basically, you know, in the end becomes a big step, big leapfrog. So we have to start it at our level. Like Udana said, we have to start it at our level. If we want to identify, we can identify certain sectors to satisfy with our production, local production. Let's start. Who's saying not to start? We can start. And like Gayani said, there are raw material issues now. For example, when batik industry was getting attention during last couple of months, the suppliers who are supplying dyes, they have put their prices up by maybe not just small percentage, big percentages. So why is that? This because there is endless greed in the system. There is endless greed. So we need to. That's why I'm saying we have to humanize this approach. We are planning. We are planning as individual organizations. We are planning as individual entities to succeed. But we don't plan as one entity, as one country. This is a small country. We have only 22 million people. So whatever, and one of the reasons, to answer technically to his question, one of the reasons why we can't satisfy all the needs in this country is that we don't have the scale advantage. So whatever comes from India, whatever comes from China has a better advantage, better price factor, price point, which can compete with the local manufacturers. That's where the protection has to be given by the government and say, look, we are protecting this particular industry. Now government has taken certain steps forward and they have given that protection to certain industries, which is a good thing. But then what we need to do is we need to support it instead of criticizing little things here and there. See the big picture, how long it will. Now we need to have a long-term plan. I mean, I'm not saying we should plan on COVID. COVID is, you know, today we have COVID, maybe next year we will have it, and after in 2023 we will not have it. So we need to think like that. We need to see when COVID is not here, what are we going to do? We should survive this time. We should survive this period so that when the time is right, we will have opportunities coming all the way from all around the world, and we need to get ready for that. And of course, in that process, we can be a happy and content nation, and we can supply to local needs as well. That's how I see it.
Okay, Nesil, I think it boils down to a clear attitude of growing together, cooperating, collaborating, competing in order to have sustained results. That really fits into our theme as well. So let me have a final question picked from the participants. I know there are many other questions which had been partially covered from the responses given earlier. So one common question for all four panelists. A lot of business platforms started at the last COVID times. Were they sustainable, or do the users go back to traditional methods after things get normal? So the question is about sustainability of some of the initiatives taken during the peak of a pandemic. So may I start from Gaini, your thoughts? So how can we sustain some of the positive, constructive efforts that people made during the first wave or during the initial times of pandemic?
Yeah, that's a quite important question. I think sometimes forget and go back to the old way of working, and that's, I think, the nature of us. But I think some things that have evolved, although not to the extent that we expected, the small local networks that were developed, because we saw how big retail supermarkets have really the whole systems were correct, although they had huge the car parks, but they didn't have the right bandwidth to accept and manage the orders. I mean, that was a big issue. But then how these small vendors who really came into the scene, and then how they supported the real regional kind of supply chains in their own areas. But I have seen not all of them, but some of them have really gone back. But then some of them have already ventured into that space by strengthening the processes in place. But I think we should support. I mean, one example is there was one area in Kanadura that dorakadu.com. She realized that there was an issue in the area and people were not getting it. Now she has made it a social enterprise, and now she's delivering it to the area, and now she's venturing through a franchising network to the entire country. So, I mean, there are many entrepreneurs, small SME entrepreneurs who are really venturing into this space. I don't think everybody will move into this, but we should support. I think like Udena said, we also have a role to play. No point in blaming anybody. If we support these small timers, then we will be able to achieve sustainability with them, and it will be a small regional ecosystem that we will be developing, which will help the country's economy as well.
Thank you, Candy. So over to Udena to add your 2 cents worth, if you are to elaborate further on that, Udena.
Yeah, I'll give a very simple answer to say, it's up to each one of us who starts whatever we are doing to sustain it. I'll give you an example of the opposite side. When COVID happened, the government gave 2 or 3 rounds of rupees 5,000 each. I have 30 employees in this little farm that I run. When the first 5,000 was given, everyone took the 5,000, had a good booze, and didn't come to work the next day as well. On the day they took the money and the following day. So not only did 5,000 go down the drain, 2 days of labor also went down the drain, and produce went down the drain. It's a very simple story. It happened again in the second round. So this is why I say sometimes, when you take very macro level decisions, it's a right decision. Obviously, it's a right decision because people are struggling and you need to support them financially. But it didn't yield the desired results, and that's what happens when you take macro level decisions that is devoid of ground reality. It's the same thing with sustainability. It's a big word. It's a valid word. It's a valid concept. But you cannot sustain something at a macro level, at a national level, at a corporate level, when it's devoid of reality at the ground level. And ground level, if individually, we understand the ground level at an individual level, and if we take the decision to sustain it at that level, I think that's the way to go.
Okay, over to you, Dimantha, for your comments on the same question.
Yeah, Professor, I think sustaining these initiatives is the key. But I would say that our entrepreneurs also are quite receptive to these challenges, and I have seen them sustaining some of these initiatives. Now, for example, the platform that I mentioned. Now, this week, I happened to order some organic food from an organic farmer, to find that she's a lady based in outskirts of Colombo, but her farm is in Haputal area. To find that she is a customer of NDB, Moratua brand, and she has registered as one of our Vanita Bimana product platform, and she displays her products in the platform. And I was surprised because I got the WhatsApp message and tried to order, and on Friday those stuff were delivered. But she is the customer. So that means they are using this platform. I was pleasantly surprised to see that she is a customer who's using our platform for this transaction. Now, the digital platform, the QR-based platforms, what I mentioned, are things that are going to stay even during COVID and thereafter. So as Denzil also mentioned, that we need to think ahead. COVID will be there for another 1 year or so. But beyond that, how we can ensure that these platforms remain. So that's where the regulator is very keen. Now, even that's where they have come up with a pricing structure also, how to share this QR-based payment. And that's a joined up effort with Lanka Pay, Just Pay, so that even the commission remains within Sri Lanka compared to a Visa or MasterCard payment arrangement where part of that revenue goes out to multinationals. This remains within the country. So it's our interest as well to promote this through as much as possible, because one is the money remains within the country. Even the small-time vendors can make use of this. I mean, even in NDB, we have seen after the first wave of COVID, digital transactions volumes have gone up by 500%, 5 times. The transaction numbers have gone up by 400%. So that shows that there is a set of people, everybody is having a mobile. And the mobile and the digital platform is something that we should be able to sustain even after post-COVID era. The learnings we need to apply and ensure that these things continue.
Absolutely. It's all about KYC, knowing your customer. So coming back to Denzil, final thoughts about the same question, Denzil? Please unmute, Densil.
Sorry, I think it's about sustaining, and as Udena very correctly said right at the beginning, we put our efforts and then halfway through we tend to forget it, and maybe for the same reasons that all of us discuss. So the time is basically to make a paradigm shift in the way we maybe act and think both, and also, for example, we are inherited with a lot of good things. For example, there's a solid solution to this ongoing COVID issue. I mean, we need to survive this. We need to survive. We need to be careful. We need to be not only we need to think of ourselves. We have to think of others also. So I think one of the things that we need to do is, now in marketing we call it cause-related marketing. There's something happening and we have to do something about it. How we make use of marketing for that? I think instead of, I mean, it's good that we talk of wearing mask, washing hands, keeping the distance, maybe it's practical or not, but I think one of the key things is that we need to promote mindfulness. It's high time that we get into some real hardcore effort on promoting mindfulness, maybe by all the brands if possible, and all responsible institutions, to promote how you can be mindful of your each movement, so that definitely you're not going to catch any virus because you are mindful of what you touch, to whom you talk, and how much of a distance, how you breathe. I've seen people, they're interacting with a lot of people, but they stay very safe. They stay very safe for the simple reason that even when somebody is close, they hold their breath, for example. So he's mindful on the fact that there's someone next to me and I'm interacting with the person, but I'm holding my breath for maybe 10 to 20 seconds. So I think I think that will be a solution for the whole world if we can do it. And then marketing also, one final thought on this, marketing has to demarket now, and has to be more true to the consumers and people, has to be grounded. And then in the world over now, we can see a trend called downshifters. Even the wealthy nations, they are coming down in terms of reducing their consumption patterns, not because of COVID, even before that. So world is coming to a point that we all wanted to get at one point, and we completely forgot about it with all these other things that we have around us. So my message is that if we can promote mindfulness across the board, individually, organization level, country-wise, globally, it'll be a solid solution for the situation we have.
The challenge is, Densil, we are mindful rather than mindful. Our minds are full of a lot of things. So thank you very much for all the interesting, encouraging thought sharing. We have come to the final lap. I know we have slightly past the scheduled time. So may I give a challenge to all four panelists? One sentence advice, because PIM and PMI is all about building the next level of leaders. We are into leader breeding, and we say we are the nation's management mentor, and we need leadership as a critical success factor in order for us to navigate amidst a planetary pandemic. So putting all these things together, what's your final one sentence message to the budding leaders, the emerging leaders of the nation, starting from Gayani once again?
Okay, thank you. I think we are all in this talk together, but in different boats. It's the choices that you make will really make you the right leader for the world. Yeah.
Thank you, Gayani. Over to Dimant, your final one sentence advice.
Okay. I would say that look for the opportunities, identify and probably identify the correct strategy for that opportunity, and keep focusing on the execution, because execution, that is the key.
Thank you, Dimant. Over to you, Udena, your final one sentence advice.
Look inwards.
Look inwards, and then to see the insightful initiatives. Thank you, Udena. Finally, to Densil, your one sentence advice.
Mindful execution.
Mindful execution. Interesting. Thank you. So let me thank all the panelists, and I personally enjoyed being with you and insightful thought sharing by each and every one of you. And I hope the participants and they benefited immensely. And thank you very much for each and every participant who were with us. And then I hope there's something to take away. And in order to ensure that you have spent this time meaningfully, in order to take something in implementing, in order to achieve sustainable results. So from thriving on the second wave, survival to sustained success. That's what we were talking about. And I hope all of us can survive and we can sustain the success. So may I humbly appeal, let's all of us stay safe, sound, and serene, act mindfully, and with the right thinking, with the right action, let's make the world a better place to survive and to succeed. So with that, let me hand over back to Pima. And thank you very much, Pima, for the wonderful organizing. Over to Pima Organizers.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor, for the excellent moderation as always, and also for the ideation of this program. My gratitude goes to our 4 panelists. Your contribution was thought-provoking, and also it will help a lot of people to learn to dance in the rain without waiting for the storm to pass, as they say. Last but not least, my sincere gratitude goes to Ian Niddamalgoda from elearning.lk for providing this excellent platform and all the technical support. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we conclude the session, yet another session of webinars organized by Pima. Thank you everyone for being part of this session, and I urge you to look forward for another exciting session in the future. Good night and stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone.